The story does not begin with deception. It begins with trust. For thousands of years, human beings lived within a world they did not debate. They walked across it. They measured it by footsteps, by days of travel, by the time it took the sun to rise and fall. Fishermen watched the horizon flatten into a perfect line. Builders laid foundations without accounting for downward curvature. Water settled, always finding its level. There was no urgency to define the shape of existence. The world simply was. Then, gradually, something changed. The explanation of the world shifted away from what could be directly observed and toward what had to be explained on behalf of the observer. The earth was no longer a place. It became a concept, a spinning object, moving faster than sound, tilted at precise angles, orbiting a distant star while racing through space. From the flat Earth perspective, this was not a discovery. It was an introduction. Most people did not arrive at the globe model through experimentation or personal observation. They encountered it in classrooms, textbooks, diagrams, and later screens. It arrived pre-assembled, accompanied by authority and repetition. Over time, it became normal not because it was tested, but because it was never questioned. This moment matters, because it marks the point where experience was replaced by instruction. From this starting assumption, the flat Earth believer asks a quiet but unsettling question. If the Earth were undeniably a sphere, why would belief in it require such early, consistent, and universal reinforcement? The assumption is simple. Truths that withstand observation do not fear scrutiny. Lies, however, require insulation. And so the investigation begins, not with hostility, but with doubt. From the flat Earth worldview, cosmology is never neutral. To define the structure of the world is to define human significance within it. A flat Earth presents existence as contained, intentional, and bounded. Humanity occupies a meaningful space beneath the heavens, not drifting aimlessly, but positioned within a system that appears arranged rather than accidental. The globe model does something very different. It relocates humanity from the center of experience to the margins of irrelevance. We become passengers on a spinning rock, orbiting nothing of importance, within a universe so vast that human meaning becomes statistically insignificant. Morality becomes subjective. Purpose becomes optional. From this perspective, the shift in cosmology mirrors historical transitions of control. When people see themselves as small and accidental, they are less likely to resist systems that claim authority. If existence itself is random, then governance becomes arbitrary. Flat Earth believers argue that the globe model serves a psychological function. It diminishes orientation. You are not here, beneath the sky. You are somewhere unimportant, replaceable, and lost in abstraction. In this interpretation, the round Earth is not merely a scientific claim. It is a worldview that erodes accountability. If there is no edge, no above or below, no boundary between realms, then no one is watching, and nothing ultimately matters. The lie is not that the Earth is round. The lie is that humans are insignificant enough for the question not to matter. A defining feature of the globe model, from this perspective, is that it cannot be independently verified by ordinary people. No civilian has personally measured Earth's curvature across distance. No pilot adjusts flight paths to account for expected drop. No engineer compensates for the Earth falling away beneath long bridges or canals. Infrastructure remains level. Water remains level. Instead, the public is told to trust indirect confirmation. Satellites cannot be retrieved. Original telemetry data is inaccessible. Images of Earth arrive filtered, processed, color-corrected, and curated. Mistakes are blamed on lens distortion, perspective, compression, or misunderstanding. Flat Earth believers argue that this structure resembles historical systems where truth was centralized, not because it was fragile, but because it was manufactured. When knowledge cannot be tested, it must be believed. The globe survives not through repeatable demonstration, but through institutional reinforcement. Academic consensus replaces observation. Credentials replace witness. Questioning becomes framed as ignorance rather than curiosity. From this viewpoint, the round Earth is protected not because it is obviously true, but because it must not be challenged. In flat Earth theory, Antarctica is not a continent at the bottom of a sphere. It is the edge of the map, a frozen perimeter that encircles the known world, protected not by secrecy alone, but by international agreement. No nation owns Antarctica. No civilian may traverse it freely. No independent expedition may explore without oversight. From the flat Earth perspective, this is not coincidence. If the world were flat, the outer boundary would need to be controlled. Knowledge of limits reintroduces orientation, and orientation disrupts power structures built on abstraction. The globe model neatly folds the boundary into a pole. The edge becomes unreachable by definition. Why, flat earthers ask, do geopolitical rivals cooperate perfectly only in Antarctica? Why does no conflict disturb its treaties? Why does curiosity there meet resistance instead of encouragement? The conclusion is unsettling but consistent. The edge is not hidden by secrecy. It is hidden by redefinition. From this worldview, space is not the final frontier. It is the final belief system. Space offers infinite explanation without verification. Distance excuses inconsistency. Complexity prevents challenge. Spectacle replaces substance. Every unanswered question can be postponed indefinitely. Flat Earth believers do not merely question space travel, they question why it must exist. If Earth is flat and enclosed, then the sky becomes a system rather than a void. Lights, motions, and cycles regain meaning. Navigation becomes grounded. Space, by contrast, absorbs wonder while demanding nothing in return but faith. From this view, the globe requires space, and space requires belief. Budgets expand. Institutions grow. The public watches, inspired, while the fundamental questions about Earth itself remain untouched. The distraction works because it feels expansive. But expansion, believers argue, is sometimes a way of avoiding the boundaries right in front of us. Maps reveal truth through contradiction. Flat Earth proponents point out that no globe projection works universally. Distances distort, routes bend, Antarctica expands and contracts depending on projection. Yet real-world navigation, especially long-haul aviation, often makes more sense when plotted on flat Earth models. Flight paths that appear curved on a globe align cleanly across flat maps. Time zones behave irregularly. Southern hemisphere distances remain suspiciously inflated. The globe requires explanation after explanation. The flat plane, believers argue, requires none. To them, this suggests the model does not fit reality, it is adjusted around it. Perhaps the most effective defense of the round Earth model is ridicule. Flat Earth questioning is not debated, it is laughed at. From this perspective, mockery is not evidence, it is enforcement. Social pressure replaces logic. Fear of embarrassment prevents inquiry. People self-censor to remain acceptable. Historically, ideas suppressed through ridicule often threatened established power. Flat Earth believers argue that if the globe were undeniably true, it would not require cultural policing. The fact that disbelief is framed as insanity suggests fragility rather than strength. The round Earth persists, not because people prove it, but because they fear questioning it. For Flat Earth believers, revelation is not an ending. It is a return. A return to trust in observation, to local truth, to human-scaled knowledge. If Earth is flat, then boundaries exist, and boundaries redefine responsibility. Systems regain intention. Direction regains meaning. The sky becomes structured. Humanity is no longer drifting, it is situated. From this perspective, the round Earth lie is not humanity's greatest deception. It is humanity's greatest detour. And detours are taken not by accident, but by design. The final question lingers. What kind of world requires its people to distrust their senses and place absolute faith in models they will never test? Counter segment. We've heard the objections. Flat Earth believers are often portrayed as people who have never encountered opposing arguments. From within the worldview, nothing could feel further from the truth. The objections are well known. They are repeated endlessly. They arrive fully formed, polished, rehearsed. They come not as questions, but as conclusions. And so this segment does not avoid them. It moves directly through them one by one, not to convince, but to explain why, from this perspective, they do not resolve what they claim to. But satellites prove the Earth is round. From the inside of the Flat Earth worldview, satellites are not dismissed lightly. They are questioned structurally. The belief is not that nothing exists above the sky, but that what is claimed does not necessarily match what is demonstrated. Most alleged satellites are never seen directly in orbit by the public. They are identified by authority, not by independent verification. Signal triangulation, radio bounce, balloon relays, and high-altitude platforms can replicate many of the same effects. The images, perhaps the strongest emotional proof, arrive pre-processed, color-corrected, layered, sometimes contradictory, sometimes retracted. From within this worldview, this does not prove deception conclusively, but it does eliminate certainty, and certainty matters. But we can see curvature from high altitude. This objection is familiar, so are the images. Flat Earth believers point out that curvature appears inconsistently, sometimes visible, sometimes absent, depending on lens type, field of view, and image processing. Wide-angle distortion bends straight lines at the edges of frames. Standard optics exaggerate horizons. Corrections are applied later, quietly. More importantly, altitude does not scale the way curvature predicts. At tens of thousands of feet, the horizon remains level. At balloon altitudes, it still resists measurable downward drop, consistent with globe equations. From this view, the issue is not that curvature is never seen. It is that it appears when optics demand it, not when physics predicts it. But gravity explains everything. Gravity, from inside this perspective, is not denied. It is questioned. Flat Earth believers often argue that gravity, as popularly understood, is a descriptive model rather than an observed force. Density, buoyancy, pressure gradients, and containment explain many phenomena attributed to gravity, especially in fluids. Water seeks level. It does not cling to curves. The globe model asks people to believe that oceans bend around a sphere while remaining simultaneously level relative to their surface. From the flat earth worldview, this is not intuitive physics. It is post hoc explanation. Not wrong by definition, but unproven by experience. But ships disappear over the horizon. This objection is considered one of the strongest, and yet from inside the worldview one of the weakest, because ships do not vanish bottom first consistently. They are lost to resolution, not curvature. With sufficient optical zoom, vessels reappear. Entire hulls return from beyond the horizon. Water does not hide them. Atmospheric conditions do. From this perspective, the horizon is not a geometric curve. It is a limit of human vision imposed by perspective and density gradients in air. The world does not bend away. Our sight simply runs out. But time zones prove a sphere. Flat Earth believers do not deny time zones. They deny the explanation. A local sun moving above a flat plain accounts for staggered daylight just as effectively, often more intuitively, than a spinning globe. Darkness does not require the earth to turn away from the sun. It only requires the sun's illumination to remain localized. From this worldview, the question is not whether time zones exist. It is whether they demand a sphere, or merely a moving light source. But everyone would have to be lying. This objection carries emotional weight. From inside the flat earth worldview, it misunderstands the claim entirely. The belief is not that billions are lying. It is that most are repeating. Teachers teach what they were taught. Engineers solve within accepted frameworks. Pilots follow instruments built on assumptions already embedded in design. The system sustains itself without conspiracy through inheritance. Very few people are required to deceive. Most need only to trust, and trust, once normalized, becomes invisible. But why would they lie at all? This question lingers the longest. From the inside, the answer is not singular. Control, orientation, psychological hierarchy, territorial abstraction, resource justification, power that no longer needs to explain itself, but more subtly, distance from truth. A world that cannot be verified personally must be administered. A world that cannot be reached must be believed. In this worldview, the globe is not a lie told to harm, but a structure built to replace inquiry. A closing thought from inside the question. Flat Earth belief does not claim final answers. It claims unfinished ones. From within this perspective, globe Earth objections do not end the discussion. They reveal how quickly discussion is expected to end, how little curiosity is tolerated once a model is accepted. The Flat Earth believer does not ask the listener to reject science. They ask something far quieter and far more dangerous to authority. What if the story we inherited is simply one version among many, protected not by proof, but by habit? That question remains unanswered, and unanswered questions, by their nature, do not disappear just because they make us uncomfortable. There is something the narrator should probably admit now. The world you just heard described, the bounded plane, the hidden edge, the cosmic deception, was never believed here. It was inhabited temporarily, like walking through a thought experiment and furnishing it just enough to feel livable. Because Flat Earth belief does not collapse under ridicule. It collapses under gentle light. And light, unlike authority, does not need permission. Up to this point, everything you've heard has been internally coherent. And that is exactly the problem. Because coherence is not the same thing as truth. Flat Earth narratives are compelling because they follow a familiar human pattern. If something feels distant, complex, or administered by institutions we don't trust, then the explanation that replaces it does not need to be better. It only needs to be closer. The horizon feels flat. Water feels level. Authority feels suspicious. And from those feelings, an entire cosmology is built. But here is where the illusion quietly breaks. The first crack. It can't be verified personally. This sounds reasonable until one realizes how little of reality is personally verified. No one individually verifies atomic theory, germ theory, GPS triangulation, or the integrity of undersea cables. Yet these systems function because verification is distributed, not personal. Flat Earth arguments often frame indirect evidence as invalid, but only when it contradicts the narrative. Radio works, engineering works, aviation works, weather models work. They all work because the Earth is modeled as a sphere. The claim is not that everyone must personally test everything. The claim is that millions of independent systems would need to be wrong in exactly the same way, without ever failing catastrophically. That kind of lie would not require secrecy. It would require magic. The second crack. Water finds its level. Yes, it does. And so does the ocean, relative to the force acting upon it. A sphere is not curved downward. It curves around mass. Level on a sphere is not flat. It is perpendicular to gravity at every point. This is not philosophical gymnastics. It is geometry. The flat Earth argument relies on imagining curvature as a bowl rather than a globe, which makes oceans seem impossible, but only because the wrong shape is being imagined. The water is level. It is just level around a planet. The third crack. The horizon proves it. The horizon does look flat. That is not evidence of a flat Earth. It is evidence of scale. At human heights, Earth is enormous. Curvature is measurable, but subtle. It appears in aggregate, survey corrections, long-distance radar behavior, satellite ground tracking, time synchronization drift. Flat Earth explanations here rely heavily on optical limits. But optics mysteriously stop explaining things the moment instruments are improved, repeatedly, by unrelated observers across the world. Reality is not hiding. It is just bigger than intuition. The fourth crack. Why the mockery? This may be the most ironic part. Flat Earth culture often frames itself as persecuted by ridicule, while being powered almost entirely by ridicule of science, institutions, and expertise. Mockery is not proof of truth, but neither is immunity from it. Some ideas are laughed at because they threaten power. Others are laughed at because they confuse skepticism with contrarianism. The difference matters. And then comes the quiet realization. Flat Earth belief is not primarily about Earth. It is about comfort. A flat Earth feels controllable. Boundaries feel safe. Hidden elites feel familiar. Cosmic insignificance feels reversible. The globe, by contrast, is unsettling. It does not center us. It does not need us. It does not care if we understand it. And so it is tempting, very tempting, to imagine that the problem is not our discomfort, but the model itself. The final turn. The flat Earth narrative tells people, trust your senses. Science asks something harder. Learn when your senses are insufficient. That is not an insult. It is an invitation. You do not disprove the globe by doubting authority. You disprove it by replacing it with something that works better. and flat earth cosmology, for all its narrative elegance, does not. It feels right and it sounds clever. It explains distrust beautifully. It just does not explain the world. The earth was never flattened by liars. It was rounded by evidence, slowly, awkwardly, and often against our instincts. And the real conspiracy, if there is one, is far less dramatic. It is that reality does not care whether a story feels good, only whether it survives being tested. Let's stop pretending for a moment, not because truth demands it, but because the charade has become exhausting. Up until now, the flat earth has been presented as a brave act of skepticism, a heroic resistance against shadowy institutions, a return to common sense. But common sense, unfortunately, has a bad habit of collapsing the moment it is asked to do more than one job at a time. So let's review what the flat earth model asks us to believe, slowly, carefully, and with great respect for the emotional effort involved. First, the flat earth is obvious, except when it isn't. We are told the earth is obviously flat, that the horizon looks flat, that water looks flat, that standing in a field feels flat. All excellent observations, right up until we remember that ants also experience highways as flat, rulers experience tables as infinite, and bacteria experience your bloodstream as a peaceful open plain. Scale is inconvenient that way. To resolve this, the flat earth narrative performs its first miracle. It declares human intuition to be perfectly reliable at planetary scale, while simultaneously declaring all instruments unreliable once they stop agreeing with intuition. The moment a measurement contradicts feeling, the measurement becomes a psyop. This is not skepticism. This is vibes-based geology. Second, everyone is lying, except the YouTubers. We are reassured that flat earth belief does not require a massive conspiracy. Only every space agency, every aerospace engineer, every satellite network, every GPS correction system, every nation, including mutually hostile ones, and every pilot who enjoys landing safely, all coordinating flawlessly, forever, without leaks, defections, or whistleblowers. But not YouTube Dave, who figured it out with a laser pointer, a boat, and a Facebook group. Dave clearly is immune to corruption. He asked the real questions, such as, why does water do stuff? Third, science is fake, except when we need it. One of the great aesthetic achievements of flat earth is its selective relationship with science. Physics is fake until radios work. Math is fake until flight schedules line up. Optics are fake until Zoom brings a boat back. Gravity is fake, but density is real and does exactly what gravity does, only flatter. This is not an alternative model. This is science eaten à la carte, with all the uncomfortable vegetables removed. Flat earth reasoning is not anti-science. It is anti-inconvenient science. Fourth, space is fake, but also extremely complicated. Space, we are told, is a lie, also perfectly simulated, visually consistent, technologically precise, operationally functional, maintained across decades, across governments, across generations. All to prevent you from noticing that the sky might be a ceiling which, naturally, no one has ever touched, photographed, sampled, or bounced a probe off of, because reasons. It is a remarkably expensive lie. One wonders why the same institutions alleged to be incompetent, corrupt, and bumbling somehow become omniscient stage managers the moment flat earth needs villains. Fifth, the earth has an edge. which no one has accidentally found. This is always the quiet part. The flat Earth has an edge, a massive one, encircling everything, guarded by Antarctica. And yet, no commercial ship has stumbled upon it. No fishing vessel has hit it. No storm has revealed it. No satellite image, fake or real, has accidentally shown it. No nation has weaponized it. But don't worry, it's there, just tastefully concealed. And finally, the grand irony. Flat Earth belief prides itself on independent thinking, and yet it produces one of the most rigid thought systems imaginable. Every counter-argument is pre-labeled. Every contradiction is pre-explained. Every doubt is proof of brainwashing. This is not inquiry. This is ideological furniture assembly, where every strange noise during construction is blamed on the manufacturer conspiring against you. The reveal, which was never actually hidden. Here is the part where the narrator stops pretending. No, this voice never believed the Earth was flat. It believed something far more interesting, that humans are extraordinarily good at building stories that protect their discomfort. Flat Earth is not about maps. It is about mistrust, finding geometry. It is what happens when skepticism forgets to apply itself inward. The closing line, now sharply delivered. The Earth is not flat, but the argument for it is remarkably well flattened, pressed smooth by repetition, insulated from contradiction, and suspiciously resistant to depth. Which, now that you think about it, is exactly what happens when an idea cannot survive curvature. After the jokes, the irony, the diagrams that collapse under their own weight, there is still something left standing. Not the flat Earth, the belief. Because even after the arguments fail, the images dissolve, and the explanations are gently dismantled, the idea often remains. And that persistence is not stupidity. It is not ignorance. It is not even defiance. It is human. Beliefs like this do not survive because they are correct. They survive because they are useful. The Flat Earth story offers something that modern life often withholds: certainty that feels personal. It replaces distant, impersonal systems with explanations you can hold in your hands. The horizon looks flat. Water looks level. Authority feels untrustworthy. The story meets people exactly where they already are. And once a belief wraps itself around emotion, facts stop behaving like answers. They begin to feel like attacks. Psychologically, debunking does not remove a belief. It threatens an identity. When someone has spent time, effort, and social capital defending an idea, abandoning it feels less like changing your mind and more like erasing yourself. This is why evidence alone rarely works. Contradictions trigger defense mechanisms. Dismissal feels like persecution. Mockery hardens resolve. The more a belief is challenged, the more it becomes a shelter rather than a hypothesis. Flat Earth, in this way, is not about geography. It is about control in a world that feels uncontrollable. A flat world has edges. Edges feel safe. They suggest limits, order, and intention. A spherical world floating in space does not. It offers no center, no hierarchy, no promise that anyone is steering. For some, that openness feels like wonder. For others, it feels like abandonment. So the belief persists, not because it withstands scrutiny, but because it soothes something scrutiny cannot reach. It gives agency back to people who feel ignored. It turns confusion into clarity, distrust into insight, alienation into membership. And perhaps most importantly, it transforms uncertainty into certainty without requiring patience. Science asks people to sit with doubt. Conspiracy replaces doubt with confidence. That trade is seductive. None of this means belief holders are broken. It means they are responding to a world that feels too complex, too distant, and too uninterested in their intuition. The irony is that science does not demand humility to belittle people. It demands humility because reality does not care how we feel about it. Understanding that difference takes time, and safety, and trust. Ironically, the very things conspiratorial thinking often grows from lacking. So when beliefs like this persist even after being debunked, it is not a failure of intelligence. It is a signal. A signal that beneath the argument about the shape of the earth lies a much quieter fear. What if no one is in control, and no story was ever written with us at the center? That fear doesn't disappear with evidence. It disappears when people feel grounded, emotionally, socially, and existentially. Until then, some will keep choosing the flat horizon, not because it is real, but because, for a moment, it feels solid beneath their feet.